Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and in this episode, we sit down with Rachel Wax. Rachel is an incredible magician in New York City, and we talk about all of that. We talk about how she became an incredible magician, what magic in New York City is like, and more. The best part is when she outlined her mind mapping process to explain how she goes from idea of a trick to a full-fledged routine, and even gives us examples so that you can do the same thing in your magic business and in your magic show. This is a fantastic episode with a fantastic magician. You're going to love it as much as I do. Here it is, an incredible episode with the one and only Rachel Wax. Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and we are here with Rachel Wax. Rachel, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to chat with you. I feel like we've crossed paths so many times in this world. I've got to see you perform, in so many fun ways and lecture and excited to just dig in. I think you're awesome. I think your magic's awesome. So pumped to chat about it. I see you holding back a sneeze.
I might. No, it's like it won't come out. All right. I'm okay.
Oh, good. Well,
Okay.
Let's start at the very beginning. How did you get started in magic?
So I got started in magic when I was about 15. My dad, he's a retired surgeon, but he always did magic on the side. And when I was 15, he taught me a self-working card trick. And I was like, oh, that's it. And all through like high school and stuff, sorry, I'm gonna sneeze. Oh, this is so annoying.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. So my dad taught me when I was 15. He taught me a self-working card trick, and I turned around and did it right away. And I'm sure it went very poorly, but that was the moment where I was like, oh, this is very cool. This is very fun. Because I had seen my dad do magic like for my friends and stuff, but it wasn't until that moment. And then all through high school, I did a lot of magic, like for my friends and, for all the students, but I really wanted to be a fashion designer. So that was really my main focus. So magic was sort of a side thing for a long time. But short answer is when I was 15, that's when I really started getting into magic.
One of the things I'm always curious about is I used to think that it was you see an amazing magician and then you get hooked. But now I've sort of grown to believe that it's something about the person likes that kind of problem solving, puzzle, performance, whatever. And then when they see it, even if it's not a great trick, not saying this wasn't a good self-working trick, but it's those people that get hooked. Was there something you recognize now? Because 15 is I guess old enough to remember, different than the people that were 3 or 4. Is there something you can recognize now where you're that's what I liked about it?
Totally. Actually, that's so interesting that you say that, because fashion design I was already really deep into fashion and sewing. And sewing, making clothes, quilts, whatever, it's a puzzle. You're taking these funny looking pieces and you have to make them fit together, and you kind of know what you want the final thing to look like. And it's all these little puzzles. And that's kind of what magic is. And I think I wasn't really into magic until it was revealed to me. And something about how it was done was very interesting to me. And in particular, what my dad does a lot, he used to do a lot more rote magic.
Yes.
Very classic stuff. Finding out how that was done, I still remember being whoa, that was better to me than the trick almost. And I think it was sort of a similar click in my brain as sewing.
Got it. Okay. So it was sort of the puzzly aspect of it, that you like, the problem solving thing. One of the funny things I always about is that it's these puzzling, nerdy, Jewish kids that get into magic, and then they find out 10 years later that what they actually have to be is entertaining, which is, the opposite. But we'll come back to the entertaining part. What'd you do from there? You went to school for fashion, and then how did this sort of become real?
So I moved from Chicago to New York for college. I went to FIT to study fashion. And when I moved to New York, I started selling Phantasma magic kits at Toys R Us and FAO Schwartz. And
Awesome.
then I met all the guys who worked for Marvin,
Mm.
and we all became buddy. Like, they were all friends already, and they had this group called the Magnets, and they would hang out once a week in like a local public space and jam and hang out and stuff. So I started hanging out with them, and that was really my introduction into the magic scene in New York. And they were so great and so welcoming. But additionally, there was a show. So the Magnets would put on a show called A Taste of Magic. It was like a really inexpensive dinner theater show where we would do magic between courses for tables. And that show ran for a while. That was like 6 or 7 years. And it was really meant for young magicians to get flight time. It wasn't a very high end show. It wasn't super fancy, but it did
Yeah.
a really fantastic job of allowing young or newer performers to like cut their teeth, get over performance anxiety, really get in front of lay people. And that was just like such a special thing that I feel like is really hard to find. So that was an amazing opportunity. And then from there, like I worked a few smaller shows around the city, and like I did, I would do some gigs here and there, but school was really intense. So that was sort of my main focus. And then I started working in fashion, and sort of as fashion, revved up over the years, magic sort of started to rev up over the years as well. And I joined Speakeasy in 2019. And after a couple of years, it's like I was basically having two effectively full-time careers. And all of a sudden, like my day was full front to back, and I didn't really have any space to grow in either field. And I didn't have time to work on new magic. I didn't have time to become a better performer or to write or anything because I was just surviving basically. And so I quit fashion 2 summers ago,
Wow.
which was the scariest thing I ever did.
What were you doing specifically in fashion?
I was a designer.
Can you give a little bit of light to like what that would look like day to day, or like were you just like with a
Yeah.
sketch pad, or were you like, what did it look?
So it's a lot of emailing. It's
Mm.
mostly emailing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like, unless you're working at a super high end brand, and sometimes even then, it's really about copying other stuff. Your boss will come in with a high end garment and say, knock it off and make it cheaper. And then we would sort of like, it was a lot of sketching, but all of it is done online now. And you would make these tech packs, which are basically like instructions for how to make that garment. Like it has all the measurements and like sewing instructions. And we would send that to our factories in China. And then most of your day would just be answering all the emails from the factories about the samples. So it's not a super creative field once you're really in it.
Mm.
So so it I wasn't really using my creativity at work in that
Right.
way.
I was gonna say, was there anything that aside from, the idea that you like fashion, want to be in fashion, were working in fashion, was there anything about it that you enjoyed, or it sort of felt like you had a real job in the day that is like, dragging, and then at night you get to be a magician?
No, I definitely enjoyed a lot of it. Like, and I made friends at every company I went to, and I found ways to feel creative and to enjoy like even the sort of like mundane picking a button for a shirt or, like that. And I really love like sketching. I really love that aspect of it. I really loved seeing samples come in that I had worked on. There were a lot of things about it that I did really enjoy. But the way companies are structured, there's like not a lot of upward mobility and there's not that much room to grow. And, so it became sort of frustrating after a while. And once I was able to like support myself doing magic, that's when I was like, okay, I can make this jump. And, it was a very amicable split from the last company I was at.
Yeah.
And I even did a little bit of freelance work for them after and, like that. But
Cool.
I don't miss it.
Yeah. Well, yes. Magic's pretty dope. If you can get it to work, Magic's pretty dope.
Magic's pretty great.
Yeah. Talk to me more about, the New York scene. So this group, the Magnets, were they all demoing at FAO Schwartz?
So this is kind of funny. Eli Bosnick, was one of the folks who started the Magnets and kind of runs it. And he worked for Marvin's Magic, which was the competitor.
Right, to Phantasma.
They were like nearly identical Magic kits.
Yeah, of course.
And so he was like the manager for the New York branch. So he just hired all of us. And so most of them, a lot of the people in Magnets worked at Toys R Us and FAO. And he, poached. There was a poaching. And it wasn't because I was a good salesperson, because I was really like crazy bad at selling.
It's just because they wanted all the people that were willing to demo for them.
Yeah. And also just we were friends.
Awesome. Talk to me about the Magnets, because, a lot of, I have a pretty real dislike for Magic clubs. And it is not, like, in theory, it's great. And there are certainly Magic clubs that are really good. But overall, it's a bunch of magicians who don't perform getting together to watch lectures of tricks that they're not going to do and showing each other tricks that aren't very good, and everyone's too afraid to tell each other that it sucks. So it's like, if you either want to be better or be more successful doing Magic, it is almost a detriment, and then they all meet on Thursday nights when all the damn gigs are. So like, it is like, if someone is an active member of their Magic club, it's like probably a good guess that they're not a full-time professional performing magician, which is probably the opposite of what all these clubs want. So what is the Magnets, and like, why does something like that exist in a city that I imagine has multiple IBMs and SAMs and all these different things? And now there's like a secret community of magicians that are meeting. Like, how is it different? Like, what are you guys doing? Why did it exist?
Totally. So I wasn't there for its inception.
Okay.
It had already been running for a couple years when I joined. So a few things that I will say, because I don't disagree with any of what you're saying.
Yeah.
So a few things about the Magnets that I think make it different are, one, there are no dues. There's no, financial bar to entry, which has always been very important. Number two, anyone and everyone is welcome. I think something that is an issue, sort of on the flip side of what you're saying in certain clubs, is maybe people feeling nervous because they don't know as much as they'd like to, or scared, whatever, feeling self-conscious. And the whole point of the Magnets is to be very much a safe space in Magic, regardless of gender or sexuality or race or anything. Everyone is welcome. And I don't disagree that, sometimes it's people showing each other tricks that are only okay. But I have two thoughts on that. One, we are very jokey, jabby with each other. So we are pretty honest about like, hey, that looks like dog shit. You should do it better. But it's always done with love. The other aspect of it is, so it really is a mix between professionals and hobbyists. And I think that's okay. And the reason I think it's okay is because there's nothing wrong with being a Magic hobbyist.
For sure.
I think, if you're really trying to like, be a hardcore professional, maybe you don't want to hang out with hobbyists. But I also think that Magic is by and large a hobby. It starts for everyone as a hobby. No one is like, well, I'm going to college to be a magician, So I think that it's okay to like allow that to blossom and allow people to enjoy that. I will also say that we do bring in lecturers sometimes, but we usually talk about it like, who do we actually want to see as a group? Like, who are we actually interested in bringing in? And it's been a very supportive group over the years.
One thing that you're teaching me or sharing with me is, I kind of thought this was like a secret underground squad of people, but this is like a
Oh my
welcome,
God,
come.
no.
We meet on
Literally
Mondays. Like,
anyone and everyone can come. We meet Wednesdays at 6:30 at Gossip on 9th Ave. Everyone is welcome.
cool. Got it. Okay. And are is it growing? Are you people wanting it to grow? Like, does anybody care? Like,
I think it's, you know what? It ebbs and flows a lot because we do have a lot of young folks. So sometimes people, are going off to college and maybe they
yeah,
come back or maybe they don't. And there's like a core squad who's kind of been there since the beginning. And then there's, people who come when they can. And, if you look at our overall members, I'm sure it's 50 or 60, but
yeah,
sometimes there's 5 people who show up and sometimes there's 15 people who show up. And I would say it's always growing in that, a lot of us are always meeting young magicians and we say, oh, you
yeah.
should come by and whatever. And then, you're a magnet and that's sort of it.
It sort of feels like, you know, you hear all these stories of older magicians where it's like, and then we went to the back room of this and they met there every Sunday. And like, that makes a bunch of magicians meeting like feel cool. And then you go to a basement of a church for an IBM meeting and you're like, this isn't it. It sort of feels like that cool factor. Like you guys meet at a bar, on a Wednesday night and hang out. Is there a reason why you don't want to be an IBM or an SAM or another organized thing? Like,
If I hadn't met the magnets by chance, I'm not totally sure how much I would have sought out one of those clubs.
yeah,
Those clubs also, and I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't know for sure, but they seem to me to tend to lean older white men.
yes,
And
yes,
I know some young folks don't always feel that comfortable or welcome in those environments, etc. Something else that we're also really big on in magnets, and this has really shown up when we've gone to magic conventions together, is I'll go, oh, I really wanted to learn this trick. And Eli will go, oh my God, that the person who's the expert on it is here. Let me introduce you. And I think sometimes in magic clubs, you get these guys who have been around for a long time and they think they're the expert on everything. And sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. And I think having some amount of, let's find the guy or the woman who's the best at that and have them come lecture.
yeah. By the way, I don't hate magic clubs. I just don't want to go.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah,
by the way, full disclosure, sometimes we're just dicking around.
yeah. Does magnet stand for anything?
No.
Where'd that name come from?
I knew from a long time.
But you don't know.
So many times and I always forget.
No problem. It's a mystery, and you'll
It's
know.
a men's rate. Cut this part out. It's embarrassing.
Okay, great.
Part of it for a decade. Don't put this out.
Amazing. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about New York because like you and I were chatting pretty openly about like performing at conventions and going around different cities, and like most of the time I go to a city somewhere in the States, somewhere in Canada, I crush. Like I totally crush. And then sometimes I'm on the lineup with another magician in that city and I'm like nervous, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to this city, like, is the host going to be 10 times better than me when I'm headlining and I'm going to feel stupid, whatever. Then I go and I'm like, people loved me. I crushed it. It was awesome. And I look at the city and I go like, I'm as good as people here, like I watch magicians in New York and I go, I don't think I'm as good as these guys. Like, I don't think that I'm as good as these guys. Maybe it's the quantity that real performing magicians get to perform in that city. Maybe it's the competition and quality. And obviously I'm being a little hard on myself and it's not a sweeping statement across the board, but like, why do you think so many incredible magicians like come out of that city? What makes magicians performing in that city so damn good?
Well, first of all, I'm on behalf of New York, thank you. Flattered.
Mm-hmm.
Although you are amazing.
Appreciate it.
Couple things. One, even though there is a lot of work here, there is a lot of competition. There are some smaller towns where there's 2 magicians, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But there's
yeah.
so many here. So you do want to be good. And also, even if, a gig comes through to a friend of yours, a friend can go, oh, I can't do it, but this person can. You want to be good because you want to be, even if a gig isn't coming directly to you. You want to be the person one of your friends recommends, So there is competition there. I think also audiences here are very interesting because if they're from New York, they're kind of jaded. And I don't even really mean that in a bad way. There is so much entertainment here. The bar is crazy high. We're in this, they could be at a Broadway show right now. You know what I mean? They could be watching a Tony award-winning Broadway show, or they could be at the nicest movie theaters or seeing a crazy famous band have a concert. The bar is extremely high for entertainment if you want your entertainment to have any lasting effect. So I think as a magician, you want to also be interesting. And then if the audiences are not from New York, they are tourists. Our city has tons and tons of tourists all the time. At Speakeasy, we're getting tourists constantly. And those folks might have different experiences with magic, different experiences with entertainment, different tastes. So we want to sort of bring the New York vibe to those people. And we also want to be able to sort of, I guess that's what I mean. We want to sort of give them a taste of New York and sort of give them a real feeling like they're getting an authentic experience when they're here. And so I think we all work really hard at that. Yeah, that's my answer
Yeah, that
for
makes
why
sense.
magicians in New York are great.
I want to talk about sort of that New York spirit for a second, which is that in magic, certainly different countries, there are different magic that we know comes out of those countries or are specialized in those countries. And then sometimes it happens with certain cities. Like, there's Chicago restaurant magic is like its own thing. Obviously, there's so much variety, but does any sort of overlapping or broad overlapping similarities to like what is New York magic? Like, is there anything that a lot of magicians in New York, a lot of the magic that you see fits into?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of comedy magic here, even though not everyone bills themselves as a comedy magician. I I find a lot of magicians to have really good comedy chops, and
Yeah.
part of that I think comes from the sort of competing entertainment saying, which is all the best comedy clubs in the world are here, all
Yeah.
of the famous comedians come through them. So we are exposed to a lot of comedy. I also think, close-up magic is really having a moment. There's close-up magic everywhere, and I think people are really craving that intimate connection as audiences, and I love doing stage magic. I really, really enjoy it. I love really sinking my teeth into that character, and because the fourth wall is more up when you're on stage, you can get away with a little bit more, but
Yeah.
close up, I think, A, because of COVID, and B, because our worlds are so digital now, and tons of people kept working from home after COVID and all that stuff. I think people are really craving that intimate connection. So I think close up magic is really having a big moment right now in New York in particular.
Let's talk about the place to see close-up magic in New York and also stage magic, Speakeasy Magic. I think this is the best magic show I've ever seen. And I say that because, don't worry, I'll stop flattering you, but I say that because I think the quality is high, the variety is high, and there's so many amazing magicians. The vibes are great. I mean, I was only at the old location, not the new one, but I
Oh
heard
my
it's,
God, you got to come back.
yeah, the vibes are awesome. And I just think it's like the most incredible show. You've been performing on it for a long time. Can you talk a little bit about, like, for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, I've interviewed Todd and a couple other performers on it, but like for anyone that doesn't know, what is it and like what's it been like being on that show so consistently?
So if you're listening, if you know about Sleep No More, Sleep No More, well, was now. They just closed after 13 years, was a really famous, really spectacular, immersive theater show. Kind of the immersive theater show that any other immersive show is effectively copying or
Yeah.
based on or inspired by or whatever. So our show was started by that same production company. So I think that has been really amazing because as producers, something that they're really spectacular at is creating a vibe, creating a world. And so you saw our show in the old space, which was in the same building as Sleep No More. We were in a room that existed. It was a great room for our show. We
Yeah.
we spent, I guess, 4 or 5 really wonderful years there. And then our show kind of kept growing and growing. So we have a new space now. If you know New York at all, it's in Flatiron. And I don't want to give away a lot about the space because I want, anybody listening, if you go to see it, I would love for it to be a surprise for you. But they built the space for our show,
Mm.
which is so rare in magic to get that. I mean, they built it with our show in mind, and every moment, not just the magic, but the vibes and the world that they've created is really top notch. So there's that. So Speakeasy is this show. It was started by Todd Robbins. And, in 2018, I wasn't there for the very, very beginning. I joined a couple months into the show starting. But at the very beginning, Todd called some guys that he thought would be good in this show that he had discussed with the producers at the McKittrick. And that was kind of it. And they thought it was going to be a one-off, maybe two. I think it was happening just once a month when they first started. And then, it was started to become once a week and then twice a week. And now we're doing 8 shows a week, which is really
Wow.
crazy. I have grown more than I think maybe I even realized at this show. So I've been there since early 2019. And something that's very special about Speakeasy that's different from some other shows is that it's not a venue. It's a show. And it's very much a cast. And I think some people go like, "Oh, I want to pop in and do Speakeasy." And some people certainly can, have and whatever, and I'm sure will in the future, but it's a very specific environment for magic. Your angles are crazy. There's people right up next to you on your sides, and it's loud and it's smoky, and you become an athlete in some ways.
Yeah.
Not just at performing, but the physical demands of it, and also dealing with audience members because it's so close up. Audiences can really vary. Sometimes they don't understand the social construct of it. Sometimes it's confusing to them. Sometimes sometimes they sit back and they're stony faced, and it doesn't mean they're not enjoying it, but it's
Yeah.
weird for you as a performer to see that up close as
Yeah.
opposed to from a stage where you can only kind of see people's faces. And there's a lot of thinking quickly on your feet there based on.
And for a bit of context, like, I know how it was when I was there, but I forget some of the details. You're sitting at a table with like 8 people, and the magician, like 8 magicians come to your table, something like that. Is that wrong or close?
That you're pretty close. You're quite close. You do get to see a variety of performers, which is what's so special about it. And that is what Todd really did a masterful job of, was curating the performers.
Yeah.
Because while we're all very different, a friend of mine saw the show and said, "You're all not what I expected a magician to be, but in different
Yeah,
ways."
uniquely. Yeah.
Yeah. So we each kind of bring a very special, we each bring our personalities to it. We're each building a little mini world within the Speakeasy world. And some of our sets play off of each other and we make references to each other. And we also have to choose material very carefully because there can't be any overlap. And, even 2 coin tricks gets a little dicey because
Yeah.
an audience member is going to leave going, "I saw 2 coin tricks." You want to
Yeah.
really create different and distinct imagery with your acts as well, because it makes it so memorable, like you leave going, "Oh, there was that guy who did this and this person who did that," and like that.
It's such an awesome show. I really recommend that everybody sees it. And if you want more info on it, I interviewed Todd, for anybody listening to this, to go and check it out. I want to chat a little bit about business. This is sort of my area in magic that tickles me the most. One of the things that's, again, really cool about New York is like, there are magicians in that city where like upwards of 75% of their income is performing on ticketed shows in that city, which like, I mean, Ben and I did public shows in Toronto for a long time. We kind of retired from that. We'll do a couple a year, but like we're not doing 2 or 3 a month. And like I would say it's going to be pretty much impossible to make the majority of your income doing a public show in Toronto. But I think a lot of people can do that in cities like New York and LA. For you, is most of your business basically doing Speakeasy, couple other spots, and then there's a handful of other gigs elsewhere, or is there?
Yeah. I would say a much smaller percentage than you think makes their income on ticketed shows,
Mm,
especially because most of the other ticketed shows in New York, you know, obviously there's like Steve Cullen and
yeah,
Dan White. I think of those as sort of outliers, but there are some other shows in the city that book different people. So you
right,
might do that person's show twice a year.
right,
I think most most magicians in New York, most of their income is from private gigs,
yep,
which there are a lot of in New York, which is
yeah,
something else that makes the city special and conducive to, you know, having a lot of magicians.
yeah,
Most of my income does come from Speakeasy, and then I do it also, you know, it puts us in a lucky position to sort of be choosy
of course.
about gigs and stuff. But that's definitely something that's special about New York. Although again, it does create more competition.
Yes. Obviously two sides of that same coin that, keep showing up in the city is the quality and the volume is high, but so is the competition. And I think, and work with a lot of magicians, I think being in a big city with a lot of competition is better for your business, never mind just your magic, but is better for your business than being in a small town with no competition.
Yeah. Well, so by the way, I think having other magic shows in the city has been good for Speakeasy.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I mean, whenever I'm like hanging out at the bar after the show, I chat with people and I love asking them like, how did you hear about the show?
Yeah.
And so we don't do a ton of marketing. A lot of it is people come back all the time.
Yeah.
And B, word of mouth. It's a great show and people, you know, and then we also have the connection to Sleep No More, which is obviously great. But one of my favorite things to hear is people go, oh my God, we saw Steve Cohen or we saw Aussie or we saw Dan White and we just had to see more magic.
Yeah.
So I think having other great magic shows is good for magic
Yeah.
because it whets people's appetites to it. And then more people are thinking, oh, maybe we should get a magician for our private event. All the magic shows I've been seeing have been great. And I think that's great for business. I know some people see it as competition. And while it can be, people will go to more than one magic show the way they'll
Yeah.
go to more than one Broadway show, you know? So I think that's really good for the economy.
It's also such a pleasure that, like, I have a friend in New York who is not a magician and he loves magic. He's seen every magic show. Aussie and Derek Gaudio. He saw Josh's show. He saw Speakeasy. I said every single magic show. And it is just incredible that A, New York, but also B, this moment in time with like Fool Us and AGT and all these really can support there being magic fans. If someone says they like magic, you don't necessarily have to buy them a kit. You can just take them to a show, which
Totally.
is so cool because I know when I was a kid, if I was a fan of magic, they'd be like, my parents were like, well, I don't know if a show's going to come to town. So we can buy you a meal,
Right. I mean,
right?
it's
So
awesome. And I'll get phone, people will go, oh, it's my husband's birthday. He loves magic. So I got him tickets
of
to this. I
course.
mean, how amazing is that
Yeah.
people can do that and have options and see multiple. And yeah, I think that's really wonderful.
Awesome. Okay, we've fawned enough over Speakeasy. I want to talk about being a woman in magic. I once got scolded for asking this question, not this question, but around this topic. So I just thought I would like open the door and say, like, overall, has it been a good experience? Has it been rough and bumpy? Has it been really welcoming? Has it been horrifying? Like, I'm sure there's different versions of all of it, but like overall, how has it been?
That's totally allowed to ask. I appreciate the generalization. It's been good and bad. In some ways, I think it's good in that I kind of like that when I sit down at a table at Speakeasy, maybe their expectations are lower.
Yeah.
Maybe they think I'm the waitress. And I know that because sometimes they give me their drink order
Awesome.
and I get to just be like, oh, no, I'm a fucking magician. You know what I mean? And I get to sort of
Yeah.
lean into that, which I love. I I'm very lucky in that I am surrounded by people who treat me like an equal and will give me notes like an equal, not like a little girl,
Yep.
which I really appreciate. But I've also had a lot of experiences, like at magic conventions mostly, where people are like, "Oh no, that's good enough." Like,
Yeah.
well, it's not. So can you help me make it better? And also, I mean, the sexism is pretty bad. There's kind of no two ways about it. I get much grosser comments than, heckles and stuff from audience members
And you're
than
talking about, and I'm not trying to remove magicians from this, but like you're talking about the audience treating you poorly, not other magicians treating you poorly, or both.
yeah, I mean, I've had both. I've definitely had male magicians, say disgusting stuff to me and I'm like, "Awesome, dude." I will say this bummed me out a little bit. I did Magic Live
Yeah.
last this past August and I had a great time and
Crushed.
thank you. But a compliment that I got a lot was you're the best female magician or you're such a great female magician. And I'm like, one, you don't have to put other women down to give me a
Mm.
compliment. And B, like, no, I'm actually good regardless. But thanks. So it's weird to like get that comment a lot.
And also to know that they meant that with all the love and compliment in the
Of
world.
course.
They're
They think
just
that's such a nice
right.
compliment. And
Right.
like,
Yeah.
like putting other women down when you say that too, which is not great. So with magicians, like I've definitely had moments where it's been pretty tough, but also with audience members, sometimes people say really gross stuff to me. Honestly, this is going to sound bad, but since I got married, I wasn't sure. Actually, since I got engaged, I didn't know if I was going to wear my ring or not while I performed. And,
Mm.
I talked about it with my coworkers and some people don't wear their ring because they want to be more mysterious and for audiences to be able to project onto them more. And I think those are all very valid things. People make assumptions based on everything about you, especially when you're a performer. And I love wearing my ring. People make gross comments to me like 30% less often, I would
Mm.
say. Which is great.
Great. Yeah.
I
That's
mean, the
awesome.
reasoning behind it is a bummer because in their
Yeah, of
mind, I've already
course.
found property. But if I don't have to hear it, I guess that's great. So,
Yes, better for you. Cool. Thanks for sharing about that. I think it's a real mixed bag, and obviously there's some amazing pros of the world you're living in as a female magician, and then obviously there's a bunch of nonsense coming from every direction. So good to hear. Talk to me about, I saw at Magic Live you did aside from the show, which was amazing, you did a short presentation about mind mapping, which is also something that you did at the session, which I didn't catch. And also there's a product or project coming up about it. What is mind mapping? I mean, I know like vaguely, but like what is mind mapping? How do you use it? How could someone?
mind mapping is, first of all, if you'd like to see a mind map, just Google it and you'll see one. But it's really just a visual way to organize your ideas and help generate more ideas. I use it particularly for developing like my persona, like what are attributes of my persona, and then you start to build on those and you get word association and whatever. And a visual aid is very helpful when you can see it. And then I also use it to sort of develop ideas for tricks because a lot of my tricks are sort of classics that I've retrofitted to fit my character with different props and different premises. And mind mapping is a great way to do that and help you sort of visualize and generate ideas, especially if you're a visual learner, which I am. Yeah. So I talked about it at the session and some people found it helpful. It's sort of just a part of my creative process. For example, for a mind map that's for trick development, maybe in the middle, I put cups and balls because I knew I really wanted to do a cups and balls or a chop cup routine with a liquid load. I started from there. So that was the center of my mind map. And as an exercise, I thought, okay, what are everyday objects that are cups and what is an item that would serve as the ball and what would the liquid be? And I came up with like solo cups that could have beer and beer pong balls or, cocktail glasses with like a garnish and maybe an old fashioned. And then I came up with coffee and coffee cups and maybe it could be tea with sugar cube, it could just anything. And it's just a way to sort of focus your attention and focus your creativity on one specific goal. And yeah, so I did a little lecture note booklet and sort of a mini lecture about it at the session, which will be available on Vanishing Ink. So
Cool.
you can grab that. But it's just sort of what I use for my creative process. My friend Eli introduced it to me. I often do mind mapping exercises with him and with other friends of mine who are very helpful. Yeah, that's kind of my little short
And
recap.
do like, I want to dig into the creative process a bit. Like, if you want a new trick, if you're, wanting to do something new, is that kind of how it starts with you? You grab a piece of paper and start mind mapping software or whatever, and you just start writing out some ideas?
No, it really depends. Sometimes it starts from, I really like this trick. How can I make it fit my character? Or sometimes it starts from, I have an idea for a joke. How do I like build a trick around it? Or like a visual thing I want to create. I'll give you an example if that's okay. Recently, so at Speakeasy, I used to sit down at the tables and I would point at someone's drink and motion for them to pass it to me and I would sip it and then I would hand it back to them without saying anything and then just go, "Oh, I just do that to establish dominance."
Fine.
And it was like a really good way to establish my character and to establish dominance when I sat down, but it's not a trick. Also, there's a bunch of flus and stuff going around that I really don't want to catch. So I was like, okay, this needs to be a trick. Additionally, I thought I needed a new opener. I needed something that was really fast and really visual and would get people to focus and would establish myself as one of the magicians very quickly. So I thought drink production. And then I thought about Barry Richardson's thing where it goes through the sleeve.
Yeah.
And I was talking about it with the guys at Speakeasy. And I think it was Alex who maybe said, oh, that might be tough. Some of the tables are hard to like stand at and whatever. And then Mark Calabrese was like, oh, well, what about Leonard Green's thing with the beer? He has an empty beer glass and he's cleaning it off with a napkin and then he pulls it through under the napkin and it's full of beer. And I was like, that looks fucking awesome and would be amazing. So I went from there and I tried to figure out like, okay, so my character doesn't drink beer, but she does drink. She is boozy. So what can we do here? And I sort of put that in the middle of my mind map and went, okay, what would my character drink / what kind of glass will fit angle wise / what, like,
Yeah. You
it's
have a
a puzzle.
box, so you have to start fitting things into, like.
Totally. Like it's Leonard Green's method or it's his handling of Ross Bertram's method. And so I sort of built it out to be like my character. And then what's so great about Speakeasy is, there's not really competition for who's the best. It's more everyone's constantly one-upping each other to make the show better and helping each other. So I went, okay, how do I make this invasive the way it's invasive that I drink someone's drink? So now I take someone's garnish off their glass and I put it in my empty glass. And that really proves that it's empty. And sometimes I have to like stick my fingers in their drink to get the lime wedge out. You know what I mean? And it's gross, but it does establish my character.
Yeah.
And then the drink, I make like a cranberry vodka or a fake vodka soda or whatever, and it has the lime wedge in it. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It's like, that really gives me a good picture of what that process looks like. And
yeah, and I think it's really important to keep in mind is that I don't consider any trick to be done ever. I mean, I think trying to learn something from every single performance is something to strive for. And that,
and just to dig into this trick, 'cause I think it's really interesting, the V1 that you did actually at Speakeasy, was it pretty much what you just described, or did you start doing the beer and then you were like, well, that's not right, and then when you start, or something else, for example?
So I never did the beer. I started with maybe it was wine or champagne.
Yeah.
The glass I figured out would work angle wise is a stemless champagne flute, and I wanted it to be a glass that we have at the bar
Right.
I have them in plastic, but to match. So the drink itself changed a bit because I thought, okay, what's the most visually
Yeah.
catching?
Right. It's not white wine. Like,
Right, exactly. So it built up from there, and then Prakash was like, well, the trick should really be that you're like building a drink.
mm,
So he was like, maybe you could like sit down with a straw and you like take the paper off, or you like blow the paper off in someone's face. And I tried that and I was like, it doesn't really fit, but there's something there. So now it's this whole thing where I sit down and I have my little bag and I take all my stuff out and I hand the straw to a man at the table without saying anything. And then I just kind of point and I go, can you, open that? I'm busy. And so they're opening a straw and that sort of piques people's attention. It's weird. It's a little weird. It's a little socially uncomfortable, but then people are kind of leaning. They're like, what is this? And then I'm cleaning the glass off and chatting with them. And every single beat of it has changed. Taking the garnish didn't happen until a week
right.
or two after I was doing it. And
And obviously you're doing 6 tables a night, 2 nights.
yeah, I mean, I'm doing it, 40 times a week or whatever. So,
Right.
Even just this past week, I was doing like a cranberry juice and saying it was like a cranberry vodka, and the wording around it was kind of funny and like not quite right. Also, the red drink, while it pops, the tables are red, so
Right.
it wasn't hitting as hard as I wanted it to. So I switched to what I say is a gin and tonic or a vodka soda, but it's just, soda water. And I realized the bubbles make it look really fresh.
Mm,
So like when I make it appear, it's like that people have been and you wouldn't think because it's a clear
yeah.
liquid, but
Yeah.
the bubbles and the ice, it just makes the glass look like you just made it. And
Awesome.
that's been hitting harder, which is cool.
Love it.
And
Super.
there's almost always somebody at the table with a clear drink. So I can go, what are you drinking? Oh, a gin and tonic? That sounds good. I'm going to have that. And that's the
Awesome.
wording that's been feeling really good. But I just changed that this week,
Right. That was awesome. Thanks for walking through both the mind mapping and that. Couple last things I want to cover. The first is you are very funny on stage. I think a lot of that comes with reps and with the city and with obviously who you are. But is there anything that you're doing? Like, are you spending a lot of time writing? Are you ad-libbing a lot and recording? Is there anything like that that you can point to, or reps, who you are as a person, and the city that you're in and the people you're surrounded with are, like, I know when I have some good friends near me, I get off stage and he goes, here's 4 lines you might like. So between me and him and doing it 30 times, that's how things get funny. Is the same for you, or is there anything else that I'm missing?
Yeah, no, I think that's the same. I like to write sort of skeleton scripts for routines, and all of my favorite lines that I've ever said have come organically. So I just write them down and try to recreate those moments basically and listen back
Love it.
on that. And I listen to a lot of comedy, and I watch a lot of comedy
Yeah.
and whatever. So yeah, I think listening back on your shows is really good. And then you can hear what played and what didn't.
Yeah, hear where people laughed. You have at some moment potentially soon a one-woman show coming out. What is it? What is it about? What can you give people a little sneak peek or something to look forward to?
Yeah. So it's funny. I wrote a show that was very dark about being a woman in magic. And it was a bummer. It was a real bummer.
Mm.
So it's not just that anymore. It's really about what it's like to be a magician through the lens of being a woman, because I am a woman, so it is through my lens, but it's really just about being a magician and what that means, and sometimes
Yeah.
the disillusionment around that. I'm working with the Women's Project Theater in New York, which is very exciting, and I've got a fancy director who I love very much. So yeah, that and I for the life of me cannot come up with a title. So if anybody has any title names, shoot me a message. Hopefully it'll be out later this year, but keep your eyes out.
Looking forward to that. Before we get to the wrap-up questions, there's two pieces of famous Rachel Wax lore. The first is Kiwi the dog. Can you tell us about this pug? I remember when you were just obsessed with pugs, and then now you have one. What is this, like the mascot of your life? What's going on with this?
Her name is Kiwi. She's my daughter. Her birthday is July 2nd. She's 2.5. She is 14.5 pounds. She's really chunky. She's really special. And she's my best little friend. And the first time that I brought her to the Slipper Room, which is like a burlesque variety club that I perform at the end of my set, like I don't do a trick with her, but at the end of my set, I literally just said, "Do you guys want to see my dog?" And then I brought her out and I showed her to the audience and I held her up like that scene in Lion King. Yeah, and please follow her on Instagram. She's Kiwi the Puggy with underscores. I just want to share her with the world as much as I can.
We will, and I will put her Instagram in
Thank you.
the description. And the last is something you told me just before we recorded, which is that you are blowing up on Big Nose Kink Reddit. Multiple posters are talking about you and sharing your photos on a Reddit about Big Nose Kink. How does that make you feel?
I love it. Honestly, it makes me so happy because growing up, I really hated my nose. I was like desperate for a nose job in high school. I was like constantly researching it and using those like Photoshop apps. And I think I even had an appointment with like 1 or 2 plastic surgeons and I would get made fun of for it all the time. Like kids would like touch my nose and stuff. They'd be like, "Oh, I just want to know what it felt like really like awful." I remember one kid asked me if I had a blind spot because of it. So knowing that it's now like a kink makes me
Awesome.
feel very like who's laughing now. Also, the Reddit threads are so wholesome. Like they're not gross at all. They're just lovely.
Well, I Googled Rachel Wax nose to verify that it existed, and it does. I did not read through the Reddit thread, but I will. So definitely excited for that. Okay, well, with every podcast episode, there's a handful of last final questions. The first is the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest needs to recommend another guest that would be a good fit for this kind of show. There's 2 catches. The first is I have not interviewed them already. The second catch is you have to put us in contact or be able to put us in contact. Is there somebody that comes to mind? You can obviously fire off a few names because you may not know every person.
Yeah, I think you should talk to Patrick Davis,
Ooh, that's fabulous.
a magician at Speakeasy, and he hasn't done a lot of like, he doesn't do like conventions or anything.
Yeah.
So I feel like he hasn't really been like, in sort of that area of the magic scene, but he has a lot of really interesting and smart thoughts about magic. And I think he's a good person to interview.
Beautiful. You did it in one. That was
He
awesome.
also has a great dog, Pumpkin.
Very good. Pumpkin and kiwi, the whole vegetable aisle, or fruits, I guess. Next is about sort of modern magic. So a lot of different things are going on in magic right now, certainly different than it was 10, 15 years ago. What's one thing you like about the world of magic right now? One thing you don't like?
Something that I do like is how much the public is enjoying magic and how good that is for the community because it means more magicians are working. And I think the more you work, the better you get. So I think it's just great for magic overall, even if it's not a money making venture, even, small like open mic magic shows are doing really well. And I think that's just awesome.
And something you don't like?
Something I don't like, I don't mean to knock on anybody who does it, but I'm not really a huge fan of all the tech magic. I don't think it's bad magic. I think there's a lot of really wonderful stuff there. I just don't trust it to work. I just feel like I've seen friends go, "Oh, the Wi-Fi didn't connect or the Bluetooth or whatever." And I there's so much to be nervous about in a performance and there's
Already, yeah.
there. Yeah. And just having something be out of your control like that, I just don't like it. And I think there are some magicians who maybe lean on it a lot and don't have alternatives, or are maybe use it as an excuse to not learn something that doesn't rely on tech. So those are my thoughts on that.
Love it. Second last thing is the take home point. People have been listening to us talk for like an hour and a half, an hour, whatever, about magic and sort of everything in it. If people to think back to this episode and maybe like remember one thing, like one of the most important thing, something you think they can take with them and use, what do you think the most important thing for you is?
I think the most important thing is to ask magicians around you for help and for notes, whether it's a magic club or coworkers or whatever. I think asking the advice of other magicians, even if you don't always take the advice, I think is good.
Love it. That's awesome. For me, it was a mind mapping. I thought that was great.
Oh, sure, that too.
Nice and tactical way to be creative. And last is, where can people find you and Kiwi and whatever on the internet?
My Instagram is Rachel Wax Magic, and my website is rachelwax.com. And Kiwi's Instagram is Kiwi the Puggy with underscores, and that's Puggy Pugggy. It's not an IE. Just
okay. And Kiwi doesn't have a website yet.
Kiwi does not have a website. She doesn't want one. It's a fight we get into pretty frequently.
Got it. Well, Rachel, thanks so much for doing this. This was so
Thanks
awesome.
for having me.
I will see you next time I'm in New York or when we cross paths or anything like that. But thanks so much for joining us, and everyone who listened. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next Thursday. Ciao, friends.
Cool.
Well, there you have it. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope, of course, that you learned something. This is the time to say to go follow Rachel Wax on social media. She's always up to cool things, including a one-woman show that is coming out very soon. But also, if you like this episode, this is the time to spread the word and tell a friend. One person. All you have to do is tell one person that you like this episode, and not only will I be grateful, but they'll be grateful too, because they'll get to learn from amazing magicians just like you are. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next Thursday. Ciao.